Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Ryan McMillan. I will be your professor for History 12 this semester for both sections 2401 and 2402. And this is a live optional session for students to ask any sort of questions that they would like. But mainly for me to give you an idea of how the course runs, what the syllabus is, who I am, things like that. So without further ado, let me share my screen so you can see my screen here. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Ryan McMillan. I've been teaching at Santa Monica College since 2004. So I've been teaching here 21 years. I started out as an English professor, and then I moved into becoming a history professor around 2009, I think. In any case, I've been teaching this particular course since about 2009. I think this is one of the first courses I taught. So I've taught this course dozens and dozens of times. Yeah, so to thousands of Los Angeles area and elsewhere students. So welcome to the course. Yeah, I think you'll enjoy it. I don't think it's I think it's a course which not only is going to teach you a little bit about the United States since Reconstruction, but also hopefully as history goes to teach you a little bit about yourself. So what I'm going to do today, this particular session is being recorded. If anybody's here live, I am going to urge you to push questions to the end where I can stop the recording and you can ask those questions privately. But in any case, I'm going to get started. Most of you know how Canvas works, so I'm not going to go into sort of the nitty-gritty of that. But I am going to go through the syllabus, and then I'm going to show you how the syllabus is mirrored inside the course, and then I'm going to go through each of the assignments and what is required of you for the course. So let's start with the syllabus. Syllabus is like your menu for the course. It's your menu for what you're going to be. It tells you what you're going to have to do in order to, if you compare it to a menu, to get fed, and also what the course offers you as it goes through. So this is the history of the United States since Reconstruction. One thing is I'm not going to teach during the sessions. I'm not going to talk to you about Reconstruction and what it is, although it is of course, the period of time after the Civil War in which the United States tried to heal itself somewhat imperfectly after sort of destroying itself. But in any case, I urge you to watch the recorded lectures I have posted in the course shell with every week, which are going to be obviously going to help you on the exams and going to help you understand how the course operates. So, and how U.S. history has developed since 1877, really since 1865. So just to first tell you about your textbooks. So there is no textbook required to purchase for this course. I know you're all upset about that. I use a completely free and online textbook called American Yawp. I will link to that here. Eventually you get there. It's a massively collaborative open U.S. history textbook. It's just as good as any other textbook on the market, and it is completely free. It also can be updated all the time because it's online as opposed to a book, which after a couple of years becomes somewhat outdated. If you want to buy a print copy of this, please go right ahead. Go to volume 2 here. You can buy it for $25 from Stanford University Press, but the content's going to be the same. It just depends on whether you want a tactile book or an online book. The chapters that we're going to be reading in the textbook are going to extend from Reconstruction here in chapter 15 and then everything in volume 2. Okay, so all of these chapters are going to be read as part of the progression of your course. There's my email. Here's my SMC email. If you have any problems handing an assignment or something like that, if there's something wrong with Canvas on that day or something along those lines, just email me the assignment. Trying not to make it a habit. Obviously, it's an emergency situation, but that's the best way to reach me. It's also the best way to reach me with any questions or anything like that. If you want to schedule an appointment to meet with me, I have Zoom. I don't have like set Zoom office hours, but I am online. So you just kind of contact me and then we can have a Zoom if you need it. Remember also about questions you have in the course. This video it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have questions, and I'm sure that many people, there's thousands and thousands of different questions you can have. But what I encourage you to do is if you have questions about a specific assignment and how it operates, I encourage you to go to the I encourage you to go to the recording of this video, because the recording of this video is going to go through each of the assignments, so you can then fast forward and find out exactly what I've said about that at the beginning of the course. If after that, then you have a question about a specific assignment, then definitely, contact me. A lot of times through email, I'll just tell you the answer, but sometimes if you have a complex question about how our assignment works, I'll refer you to the video, which is an easy way for me not to A, repeat myself, and B, say something slightly different than what I said in the video and confuse people. You know what I mean? Anyway, so let's look through the syllabus. Here's your student learning outcomes. I'm not going to go through the specific outcomes here. You can read them yourself. Here's your evaluation and your grading. How do you get your grade? How do you get that A in this course? Everybody wants to know that. Inquiring minds want to know. And as you can see, the grade breakdown is not too complex. It's there's 20% for your final exam, 20% for your midterm exam. The midterm exam occurs in, yes, you guessed it, the middle of the semester. The final exam occurs, yes, you guessed it, at the end of the semester. So that's 40% of your grade, those two exams. And I'll talk more about them as we go through, but I think the format of them will become kind of obvious once I start talking about the other assignments. You have a final project that's worth 20%. We'll discuss that at length closer to the end of today's optional session. Sorry, I'm just adding up all the syllabus things, making sure it's correct. It is correct. You have short written assignments. There are a number of short written assignments you do that add up to 15%. I believe that there are 3 or 4, but anyway, so do them all to get the full 15%. Quizzes, there are quizzes. The quizzes, I'll talk about the quizzes first, since they're one of the easiest things to describe. The quizzes are based on the reading that you've done in the textbook that week. The thing about quizzes is that you have to take them on time, but you can then take them as many times as you want. You do not have to settle for whatever grade you get on the quiz from the beginning. The quizzes are designed to quiz yourself. They're designed for you to know the material. They're also designed to clue you in as to what some of the questions might actually be on the midterm and the final exam. So if you do the quizzes, it's quite probable, that at least one of the questions, maybe more, will appear actually on the final exam and midterm exam. So take the quizzes. If you get an 80 or if you get a 20 or whatever you get, you can take it over again. But please don't take the quiz until after you have read the textbook. Doesn't make much sense. Then it's just trial and error, and you won't remember anything from the material. So that's quizzes, and we'll leave aside quizzes. That's one aspect of your grade, but it's only 10%. Okay, so that's only 10%. But missing a single quiz grade, there's about 15 quizzes, I think. Missing a single quiz grade does start to sort of erode at your grade. Of course, you can take them as many times as you want, but obviously you want to take them the week that they're due. There are some discussions in this class, not a ton. I used to have a discussion every week, and then I found that was a little bit onerous, and kind of students kind of phased out about them. So I only have a few discussions, but they are also worth 15%. So you have basically what you're going to be doing every week. You're going to be doing a quiz or maybe 2 quizzes each week. 1. 2, you're going to be usually each week have a short written assignment or a discussion. There are some weeks where you don't. You don't have one midterm week, you don't have one final week, but for the most part, on alternating weeks, you'll probably have a discussion or an assignment. So this describes all of this more in depth in a textual form, but basically what I'm saying is approximately that. We'll talk about the final project, 5 to 7 page paper. Just relax on that for a second. We're going to talk about that. Short written assignments, discussion, enrollment. A little note about plagiarism and cheating. It says it here, obviously don't plagiarize. One thing about AI use is I know when you're doing it. And if you do use AI, and this is especially true, and it's happened to several students, if you use AI and then you repeat something that AI says that AI hallucinates, such as a fact or such as a source, and you cite something that is not, that AI, because AI does this all the time. And if you do that, I'm going to fail you for the assignment without recourse of doing it over. So use of AI is committing fraud. It's committing fraud if you give me the wrong citation or you give me something that links to something that's not the actual site. So that's actually beyond plagiarism. That's actually just fraud. So don't do that, because I don't really have much of a tolerance for that. Plagiarism, I mean, people plagiarize, every once in a while, sometimes accidentally. So that's something a little bit more easily forgivable. But generating completely false facts is definitely something that I do not tolerate. So you can read all of this. This tells you all of the sort of support services at SMC. They're on every syllabus, so I'm not going to go over every single thing that it says. Okay, so let us look at the calendar. Okay, here's my course syllabus. Just first of all, know that this syllabus is mirrored in the modules. So the way that you should be taking the course, and notice here, if you look down here, these are all hidden. I hide the assignments from you. I hide the discussions. I'm not hiding them from you. It's just I'm hiding this alternative way of getting to them, because what I want you to do is go through the modules. So if I click on the modules, what you're going to see in this is, as we go, lesson 1, lesson 2, those are each of the modules. Each of them is going to mirror the information that is in the syllabus and listed on the syllabus. So you can look at the syllabus, and the syllabus has some links to some of the readings and things like that. But the best thing to do is to each week log into the course and then go through, I'm going to do all the stuff in the module for this week. Okay, this week, I'm going to do all the stuff in the module for this week. If you do it another way, and this does happen, students sometimes miss a particular assignment. And that's because they're going through either, sort of in a, some backdoor to an assignment or something like that. The best thing to do is just to go through the modules to keep everything simple. Okay. Let's look, for instance, as we go through the course. Let's say you're starting week 1, which is already underway. In fact, it started on Tuesday after Labor Day. And so now we are already into, and I basically, the first week, I really wanted everybody to get, hit the ground running. And this is a very important lesson. This is the only lesson I actually teach in both the History 11 and History 12 sections of the survey courses, which is Reconstruction. All you have to do for this week, aside from completing this "Hello, my name is" discussion, which by the way is due today, please participate in that. That's one of your discussion grades. Really easy way to get money. It's a really easy way to get points for the course, and it's required. And it also clues me into whether you're paying attention to the course at the beginning, because it happens students take the course and then they forgot that they enrolled, or something comes up or something like that, and then I have to drop you if you don't participate in the course before a particular point. Okay, and I do take that to a certain extent kind of seriously, because I take it seriously because, frankly, the administration gets on my back if I don't drop people who are not active in the course. So they're pretty vigilant about it. Definitely just fill in the "Hello, my name is" discussion, and then I'm not going to drop you from the course. It's the easiest way not to get dropped, is just to interact with the course on this first week. Okay, you might get dropped later, but that's a whole different story. As if you just stop participating. Okay, let's look at so quiz 1. This is due 5th, 6th, 7th. This is due on Monday. All of the assignments, most of the assignments, I say most because the tests are not. The tests operate on somewhat of a different schedule. But pretty much every assignment, meaning discussions, assignments, quizzes, are on a Monday schedule. In past iterations of the course, you don't really need to know this, they ended on a Sunday, but because the way that SMC worked this semester with Labor Day, I'm ending them on a Monday because it's just easier that way. So you have an extra, so you have a full basically Tuesday to Monday sort of schedule for this course. So your first assignment to do is not only to read the American Yawp, not only read these primary sources, as well as watch the Reconstruction lecture created by yours truly, but also for you to take the quiz at the end of doing all of that. So that's all you have to do by next Monday at midnight. All of the assignments should be due by midnight Pacific time. So that really actually is 11:59, by the way, because then the 12 o'clock is the next day, and so that's how the assignments run. Okay, let's go to lesson number 2. Oh, looks a lot like the other lesson in that you have a quiz due, You also have, notice here, you have 2 chapters, okay? Most of the weeks, you're going to have 1 chapter. At the beginning of the course, and this is kind of a quirk of History 12, because I try to get through a lot of the first chapters fast, because you want to spend a little bit more time on World War II. You want to spend a little bit more time on, some of the later sections, civil rights movement, etc. I kind of go through a little faster in the first chapters. You're fresh at the beginning of the course. It's a good time to, to hit the ground running with this stuff. But there are 2 chapters to read for September 15th, which is 2 Mondays from today. Okay, so take the quiz and you're done, and that's what you do for that week. Let's go to Module 3. Now you see we're finally in the zone of actually having assignments. So the first 2 weeks to take it pretty easy. By the time you get to September 22nd, you start to have to hand in assignments. My first assignment, and I'll show you, actually we'll go back up here. You can see all of these. There are only 3 assignments in the course, okay? One of them you'll notice is connected to the final project. I'm going to discuss those together when we get to them. But first, let's discuss these 2 assignments because you don't have a discussion. And I'll discuss the discussion too as we get to it. Here's assignment number 1, old newspaper dive. Here we go. Okay, the old newspaper dive is one of my favorite assignments. I assign it for a variety of different of my classes. The Library of Congress a few years ago, now it's probably about 2 decades ago, decided to start the process of digitizing all of the newspapers that had been in print up until 1963. I don't know why they chose 1963, but they did. And so they started digitizing all of these newspapers and making them publicly available on the Library of Congress site. They have just recently updated this website. I think they've done a really excellent job, actually. Sometimes updates irk me, but in the past it was pretty easy to use. It took a little bit of a learning curve. It's even easier to use now. So, and part of the process of this particular assignment is to get you to know how to use a historical database and how to get you to use a primary source database. Most of you have some experience with this, I'm sure, but there's really an art and a set of skills that you should be aware of that go into effectively using a database, as opposed to kind of using a database either wrong or using a database not to, anywhere near its full potential. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Here's let me extend this. So the first assignment is essentially what I would like you to do is go to this site called Chronicling America, which I'm going to have here to link, open a new tab because I don't want it to. So here's Chronicling America. And all I really want you to do, and it's pretty simple, although it takes some legwork. It's only a 500 to 1,000 word reflection, which is basically 1.5 to 3 pages. You can go over if you want. All I want you to do is find 3 newspaper articles. And all I want you to do is find 3 newspaper articles about the same general event. That could be a 1-day event, like the sinking of the Titanic. That could be an event that spans a few years, for instance. But I generally would like it to be, as I say here, from the first few lessons of the course. So let's say up until World War I. So pick some event that you've read about in the YAWP or just that you know about from U.S. history, and then try to find 3 newspaper articles. They can be from 3 different newspapers. They can be 3 issues from the same newspaper on different days, for instance. They can be 3 newspapers from different parts of the country, 3 newspapers from the same city with different political perspectives. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I just want you to get 3 news articles, 3 different news articles about the same event. So let's take the sinking of the Titanic, which I always use as an example, even though I actually don't think it's a creative example to use, but everybody knows that the Titanic sank, right? Everybody saw the movie. It sank in 1912. And so if you went to the exact date that the Titanic sank, and then some days afterwards, you would easily find 3 newspaper articles about that. But that goes for anything. And take that, a particular battle in World War I, battle in the Spanish-American War. You could talk about, as I say here, the massacre at Wounded Knee, which happened on a specific date. All of those things, all of these events that are going to appear inside of a newspaper, all I want you to do is find 3 articles. And then what I want you to do is I do not want you to write a paper. Okay, this is not a paper. Notice I call it a reflection. All I'm really asking you to do is, to a certain extent, chronicle your perceptions of the article as you're reading it, and then also compare it to the other articles that you have. And I don't need like a thesis. I don't need you to reinvent the wheel. I don't need a big theory. All you can basically do this just by going through the first article and describing what it says, and then going through the second article and going, well, this says something different than the first article, right? But these are some really interesting things I saw. And then the third one can be like, okay, so this one differs from number one and number two because it says this. That's all I want you to do. It's almost like a play-by-play, if you know about in sports. It's basically imagine that the action's happening as you have these articles in front of you, and now you're basically describing what you're seeing. That's one way to do it. If you want to write a paper, some sort of thesis-driven reflection, that's fine, but I'd like you to do it that way. Very, very important for this assignment, and this is something which I'm growing a little bit increasingly stern about, is that I need either a link to the paper that you're looking at, or I need a direct citation with the link. You're going to be using Chronicling America's site, so you should be able to actually link to that particular page. You can even download the actual article and or the page of the article as a PDF. It's not that big, and you can include that in your submission if you'd like to do that as proof that you actually looked at the article. But don't complete the assignment and then give me and then just don't give me citations and just vaguely say, well, I looked at the Nashville Daily Leader for 1912 and I did this. I need the link, and it's because that's going to tell me that you went through the Chronicling America site to get that particular newspaper. Okay, so that's basically it. The way that you use the site is partially part of your trial and error for the project, but I will show you briefly how this is done. Notice there's a number of different options here as to what you can search for. Say I was to look for Titanic. As long as you spell that correctly. Say I want to look like what people in, I don't know why this is not working. This usually works. You can pick the particular state or province. I don't know why that's not working. These drop downs are not working. Let me search again, see if this works. There we go. Sometimes you just gotta kick the jukebox, as they say. So let's say I want to see, well, what did North Dakotans think about the Titanic, right? So I go, gonna ask me what the date is. It's April 12th, 04/12, 1912 to 04/16, 1912, right? And you search, and what comes up? There we go. I think this is going to be about, and it's going to make you verify that you're human. And 1,341 souls carried to bottom of Atlantic in the H.V. Chaffee, who I guess was a North Dakotan. See how unique of an experience you're going to have if you look at the North Dakota Titanic coverage. Anyway, you can do anything. Really any event. I encourage you not to. I don't want 70 students doing the Titanic, so please choose another event. But if you really want to do Titanic and you have an original take on it, go right ahead. Okay, let's go back to modules. Okay. Remember, I already said this, but hello, my name is discussion, do that. You got your assignment number 1 here. Now we're moving to assignment number 2. Before we do that, I do want to point this out. There's a history department skills workshops, which the history department puts on. Different professors commandeer a particular workshop. And so if you look at this, the first one is going to be on the 9th, the second one's on the 16th, and the third one, reading analytically, is on the 23rd. And I'm doing that one. If you show up to any of them, professors have a list of those students that showed up, and notice here you have each workshop attended will result in the addition of an entire 0.5% on your final grade. So if you take, for instance, all 4 workshops, you automatically get 2 points. So imagine this, say you end up in the class at an 89, I add those 2 points, you have a 91 in the class, and then you have an A. So it can really help at the end. In any case, so you can click on these links and register for the workshop. Anyway, enough about that. Here is, so let's go to, notice if we keep going, and I'm not going to go module by module through everything, but notice we get here, here's your first discussion. The thing about discussions is they're pretty simple. I mean, everybody's done an online discussion before. This is nothing I have to really talk too much about. Remember, you're graded not only on your the quality of your first post, and that does have a certain amount to do with length. Okay, so if I see a really short post, most of the time I'm going to assume it's not that, but it doesn't have to be a book. It just has to be like, 200 words or more or something like that, which is really not that hard to do. And it's a discussion, so it can be pretty freewheeling. You don't have to prove anything. I'm just asking you a question. And then you need to go respond to another student. That response does not need to be nearly as long as your first post, but it should be something which not only, you shouldn't have a discussion follow-up that says, and you might have to hunt for a decent comment, but don't do a discussion follow-up that is like, hey, that was a great point. Goodbye. There's not much worth in that. So for a discussion post, you're going to have your own sort of answer to the question and the discussion follow-up. Then try to initiate further discussion, right? Try to see if you can get others to kind of continue the discussion. Whether you do or not doesn't have any bearing on your grade, but it also means that you should have some sort of fulsome, honest, insightful response to what the first person posted. Generally, the grading goes like this. They're each worth about, it says here 100 points, but it's basically like a 70, 7 or 70 out of 100. You get 7 or 70 out of 100 if you have a good first post, and then you get the extra 3 when you do the follow-up. So they're all kind of engineered that way. You'll find that I don't like, the one thing that I really don't like receiving late is discussion posts. I take off points for things that are late. Generally, discussion posts, I like them to be handed in that week. If you hand them in late, I am going to take off points from them. And if you hand them in too late, like if you do what has happened in this course before, is somebody dumps 10 discuss or like all the discussion posts like in December to me, I'm just going to give them a 0 because they're of no use, because they're stale. So it doesn't matter that you did them or not. Okay, so try to get the discussion post in the week that it's due. One good thing about this course, to that note, is that you can work ahead. So if you want to do all the discussions today, go right ahead. It's great to have discussion posts generated early. It's great to have, because a lot of times people only do due dates up until the last minute, and with discussions and everything bunches up. So you'll get my eternal thanks if you do the discussion earlier than the Monday upon which it is due. Okay, let's keep going. Another discussion. See, this week we have a discussion assignment and a quiz. Sometimes that occurs. But let us look at the second assignment. The second assignment has a little bit of a history to it in that it is evolved. It originally was an assignment meant to coincide with the World War II module. What happened was that I started to put it in different parts of the course. That's why you see a World War II picture. This is a D-Day picture. But you don't have to choose World War II as your particular topic. I've expanded what you can do with oral histories. And the goal of this particular assignment, and it's short, just 2 to 3 pages, double-spaced, MLA or Chicago format, is you can either become acquainted with the oral history archives pertaining to World War II at Rutgers. You can look at the Rosie the Riveter World War II American Homefront project. You can also, by the way, and if we go to Rutgers, notice there's a conflict index. There's a number of different conflicts. They talk about Vietnam. They talk about, veterans. And so you can choose one of those too. You don't necessarily just have to choose the World War II one. That's one thing that I've changed about this. In any case, what you will find when you go to the Rutgers site is that you'll have dozens of people. Notice there's a whole bunch of projects here, right, that you can, and if you look, so the military history conflict index, and we go to conflict index. Sorry, just one second. You'll find that the Rutgers site, and by the way, there are other collections of oral histories from different people who went to war all over the internet. I'm directing you to the Rutgers site. If you find another one, that's fine. Just remember, just as I said with the newspaper assignment, you have to cite and you have to link. Okay, so let's take randomly Harold. Hi, Harold. So here's Harold, and then you have to link to see links to oral history sessions. You got to click on his name. And then what you're going to get is this giant long interview that was done with Harold by a trained oral history historian. I don't need you to read the entire oral history, okay? It's you can if you want, and they are very absorbing, and I do this all the time, but you can skim it. And what I want you to do, and the purpose of this assignment, is to find one fact that Harold mentions, one fact, any fact, that intrigues you, and then find out more information about that using secondary source research. So, for instance, and I could literally turn to anything, I noticed the term foxhole here. The four of us, I was the only officer. I don't know where this is. German POWs, the four of us dug a foxhole. It was lined with a barrage balloon that was shut down to keep the sand out. Top of it were hatch covers. Okay, facts. Now, it doesn't talk about a specific battle or a specific event. That is something you can certainly choose. It doesn't talk about a specific munition. It doesn't talk about a specific, airplane or something like that. You could also choose that. What Bayer says here is he's talking about a foxhole and a barrage balloon. Just take that one sentence and be like, I want to find out what a barrage balloon is. What's a barrage balloon? And literally the research that you do, which should be from reputable sources, should give the reader, after they have that access to Bayer's little account where he doesn't describe what a barrage balloon is, then you're going to define what a barrage balloon is through your own historical research. And that's really all you have to do. Find a fact in the oral history part, and then find some background for it, and then kind of blend the two. Say that Harold Bayer mentioned a barrage balloon, blah, Harold Bayer did this, blah, 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 this, and here a barrage balloon was a device that was used in World War II to do X. That is all you have to do for that. Again, this is not a thesis-driven paper or assignment, much like the, notice I call it an exercise, much like the Chronicling America. This is basically just, whereas Chronicling America was like, just tell me what you're finding. These are exercises. This one is basically just telling you to find some sort of outside research to give the reader of Harold Bayer's account some more depth. And that's basically all you have to do. So there's a lot of ways to get to this. Please don't use Andre Beaumont's. Everybody uses Andre Beaumont's. This is just an example. I'll let you read the rest of this. It's pretty self-explanatory. And that is due on the 6th of October. Okay. So, okay, let's go back to the modules. As we go forward, you'll notice that we're going to soon come to a midterm. Where is your midterm? Where is it? There it is. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, well, it'll be up here. Here's the midterm. I don't have a separate module for it. The midterm is open for a specific, I should probably tell you exactly how long. I usually open it for somewhere between 3 and 5 days for you to take it. Here's the midterm exam due. It does not say. And I don't want to open it. Oh, yeah, we might as well open it. Hold on a second. Modules. Midterm exam. So here's a midterm exam. Notice it is available from the 9th to the 15th. It's, by the way, don't take it on the 14th. I only keep it available because then people are always asking me about, oh, it closed too early. So it's definitely not closing too early, but you got to take it by the 13th. It's open from the 9th to the 13th. You have all of that time to take it. Remember, your quizzes, right? Your quizzes are going to be very helpful in your midterm exam. So, because a lot of the same questions might appear there. So I don't think you'll have much of a problem with it. It is entirely multiple choice and in the same format for the final. So I think you're going to do well. Okay, let's go to the ultimate thing in the course, which is your final project, as well as this prep assignment called assignment number 3. Notice here's final project due on December 8th. Here is the final project proposal due on October 20th. I'm going to go, and I think this is useful for you to do also when you're going through the, the course, is definitely before you start in the final project proposal, look at the final project instructions. Okay, don't just read the final project proposal and kind of fill it out without knowing what your end goal is. That might seem logical, But just because of the way that the course runs and is paced, oftentimes students come first to the final project proposal. They'll be like, do something. Read this first, okay? You have two options for your final project. The first option is called an oral history project. Remember, we just had that assignment on oral histories, which I just described. So your first assignment is going to be oral history project. Your first option. There's another option, an archival research project, which I will get to in a second. I originally designed, the final project to be solely an oral history project. And for a while, when I had assigned it, that's all the students did. I changed that because a lot of students said that they don't like interviewing people, or they were shy, or they couldn't find somebody, or something along those lines. And I was like, well, okay, well, you can do the archival research project option. So then I put that. So I'll discuss both of them. The oral history project, I think, is the most fun and the most useful and the most, the one that is also most free of any suspicion that you use some sort of AI on. The oral history project involves you finding two individuals who remember the same event, period. They have to remember the same event. Now, what that means by remembering is that they have to have been alive during it. You can't take something from Reconstruction and do an oral history because all of the people that were around during Reconstruction are unfortunately deceased. So you can't talk to them. You have to talk to actual people who experience the same event. And then essentially the long and short of the assignment is to do a compare and contrast of their perspectives. If you keep it as simple as that, you're probably going to do fine on the assignment. But what you want to do is make up a list of questions. And if we have an event such as, say, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, 1963, you find two people who remember that. It's getting harder and harder to find people who remember that because they're getting older and older, but you don't have to choose something that deep back. You can choose, of course, 9/11. You can choose, a particular war, a particular, the death of Lady Diana. No, actually, don't do that. That's British. Just do something that has some sort of nexus to the United States. Almost everything has a nexus to the United States. So, for instance, if you wanted to do the death of Princess Diana as viewed by two Angelinos, you can do that. That's fine. That is kind of U.S. history. One thing I get a lot of questions about this particular assignment is, I really wanted to do my oral history about somebody that experienced something in history in another country, because a lot of us, are from different countries. You can do that, and the reason why I allow you to do that is not because it's not an American history course, but because everything kind of involves American history by the time you get to post-1945. So it's hard to find a non-American nexus. So I've had students who have done, who've had parents and ancestors that have fought in the Iran-Iraq War. I've had parents, people who have had parents who, for instance, lived in Venezuela during 9/11. And they had their father lived in, for instance, Costa Rica, and then they had the perspective of living in Venezuela and Costa Rica during 9/11. There's no requirement that the people that you are interviewing have any sort of close and especially unique relationship to the event. Everybody has a unique relationship to every event. And so, and as long as they remember it, the historical data from everyday people, like most of the people that we know, is just as valuable as the historical data from someone close to the event, in my opinion. It tells us something. And so this is a historical exploration, which is not necessarily privileging access to people who are right there. This is really something where you can just basically take two people, and one common thing that people do is they get two parents, or they get a brother and a sister, or something along those lines, hopefully older, and then they interview them. They use the same set of questions for both. Then they record it, audio recording, transcribe it, which you can use this transcription software that's able to do this now quite easily, or you can just sit there and type it out. And then use that as your primary source. That is your primary source set for the paper, is those two interviews. And then you're going to compare and contrast what their different perspectives were on the event. And you can ask yourself whether, and you can ask your interviewees this too, whether that perspective is informed by them being male or female or non-binary or however you can define that as to whether they lived in this part of the country, if they lived in another country and the other person did not. I mean, whatever it is that you want to, whatever kind of division that you want to make there in terms of analyzing those two individuals, please go right ahead. And because what you're going to be doing is exploring the uniqueness of that individual in relation to an event and showing the really incredibly unique nature of each person's personal experience in relation to history. So all you have to do, remember, is choose an event, interview two people, well, make a list of questions, interview two people, record that, make a transcription, and then in your report should not be your transcription, although you're going to be using quotes from it. Your report should be an analysis, a comparative analysis of those two interviews. Okay, we all have the ability to create these primary sources around us, and so this is a popular option for people to choose. I will say I have a whole list of different events here that you can look through, and it's not limited to those at all. The other option, if you did not want to do that, is the archival research project. And by archival, I don't mean the National Archives. I don't mean like a specific building. What I'm talking about is an archive that you put together, meaning a collection of primary sources. Those can be oral histories. Those can be letters or diaries or anything really, statistics, speeches, whatever. And you put together a collection of those to make a particular point. So this is more thesis driven, where you have to actually prove something, right? In this, you want to choose an archive, like put together an archive that, sort of talks about some concept in history that you're interested in. A lot of times, notice here, you explore some sort of research question of your choosing. Okay, so you're choosing a research question. What do you want to know about something? Make that narrow, because you don't want to do something that people have done over and over and over again before. You can do something that people have done before, but it's much more useful to do a project of this sort on a narrow topic. And by that, I mean, say you were to do with the archival research project, I wanted to do the history of 9/11. Well, that's just too broad of a topic. You're not going to say anything original in a short paper about 9/11. If you wanted to look at the experience of, let's say, Arab Americans in Brooklyn during 9/11, then that's interesting. Now, you can do that by doing research. I mean, you don't have to, but notice how the oral history and the archival can kind of be similar, where you can find oral histories online that become your archive that answer the question that you have, right? So let's say you wanted to find the history of Arab Americans during 9/11 who lived in Brooklyn. Well, you might very well be able to find online a series of oral histories that pertain to that particular topic, and then you analyze those, and you should analyze more than just two in that case, because you're not putting them together. Find like 4 or 5, and then write a paper about that. And that's really what the archival research project is like. And again, it doesn't have to be oral histories. I'm just using that to show you how close these two, potentials are. But you can use diaries, whatever sort of primary source you want, you can sort of use. The way of getting me to agree to let you do your assignment is to go through the final project proposal. Now, the final project proposal is very, very simple. It has 2 different instructions depending upon an archival or oral history. And the key part about the oral history project, which again is due on October 20th, is to tell me what it is you're thinking about as of October 20th that you're going to do. I have no illusions that you're going to be done with it, or that this is going to be anywhere near polished, or that you've had it like completely well thought out. But you should fill out this, answer these questions. You can answer them one by one. This does not have to be in a paper format, but answer them as to what's the rough idea of the historical event, who are you going to interview, all that sort of stuff. And then what you're going to do is, when you propose that to me, then I'm going to be able to give you feedback on it and tell you whether I think it's a good idea, whether you should narrow it, whether it actually takes place during the timeline of the course, which I get every once in a while. But nevertheless, remember the timeline of course is 1865 to the present. But whatever you do, basically, you're not bound to it, meaning that this is a proposal. You can change it between October 20th and the time that the paper is due on December 8th. That doesn't mean that I encourage you to do so, because what I am hopefully having students do with this is to have a full head start on completing that final project later. So all you have to do is kind of notice it says here, please read before completing this, the final project. So you click on that, takes you to the final project. But what I'd like you to do is by October 20th, give me some idea of what your final project is. About the due date of this, this is another thing like discussions that I really like to have handed in on time, and I get pretty strict if it's not. The reason why is because I'm giving you, if you hand me in the final project proposal with the final project, I might not even grade it, because there's no point in you giving me the proposal in conjunction with the project, because I can't give any feedback on it, which is part of the function of the proposal. So please get this done. You can do this as early as you want, but basically tell me what it is that you're thinking about doing so that I can then fill out the comment box and give you feedback as to the best direction to go. A lot of times I say, hey, great idea, go nuts, that's awesome, and give you a few suggestions. Sometimes I'm like, you have to seriously narrow this down. This is way too broad of a topic, something along those lines. Okay, so generally that is less likely to happen if you do the oral history project, because you're interviewing 2 people, and therefore it's already pretty narrow because you're only interviewing 2 people. So anyway, that is your final. That actually describes not only the final project, but also describes the final project proposal. I've also described both of the assignments here. I've described how the discussions work. I've discussed generally the pace of each of the modules and what's going to appear in each module. And I've also discussed briefly, the format and dates of the midterm and final exam. I think that is all I really have in terms of how the course runs. Remember, let me look at the syllabus real quick. This should be here. I don't know why. I don't know how this disappears from my. I did have a policy about late work that if you turn in something, and I'll just say it here right now because you should be watching this video one way or another, but I will put it into the syllabus as well. If you hand in something 24 hours late, I'm going to take off 5%. That's not a lot. Say you're going to get 100 for it, you're going to get 95, no biggie. It's probably not going to affect your grade. After a day, though, and up until 2 weeks, you can still hand it in, but you can't get over 80% of the grade. Okay, so if you hand it in 2 days late or 14 days late, you're still going to get 20% of your grade taken away. If you hand it in between 2 weeks and 6 weeks late, then I take off half of the grade. And if you turn it in more than 6 weeks late, I can only give you 20% of the grade. So there is a sliding scale for this, and a large reason for that has to do with the fact that I don't know why, but there was a particular year where everybody started handing in everything at the last minute. They were taking advantage of, what they thought was a liberal lateness policy, but I do take off points for lateness. But there's the policy that you can hand in something late, but you can't get full credit on it. There's an exception to this. If, say, it's 11:59, you hand in something at 12:20 or even 2 a.m., probably going to let it slide, okay? But if you hand in something, 4 days, 5 days late, then I'm just going to have to take off the points per the policy, and I'll put that policy back in here. I don't really understand how it got eliminated from the syllabus. In any case, that is it. So I'm going to turn off the recording, turn off the screen share. If anybody who has gathered here has